I had long noticed that in the evenings, the apartment seemed to narrow slightly. Not literally, but in feeling. The walls stood in the same places, but the air between them seemed to become heavier, denser, closer to the face. That evening, I felt it especially strongly. The day had been long, exhausting, overflowing with other people's voices, messages, deadlines, and answers that must be provided today. I returned home so drained that I didn't even turn on the main light immediately. I walked into the room, sat in an armchair, and just froze. I turned on the old speaker, found a background playlist without words, soft electronic music that sounded more like ocean noise than music. The light from a street lamp hit the window at an odd angle, and its reflections slowly slid across the ceiling like waves. I liked watching the light move slowly, back and forth, back and forth. The silence was almost sterile. Even the refrigerator seemed to have quieted down. My thoughts were neither deep nor important. They simply passed by like cars on a distant train. What to buy tomorrow? Should I reply to that person? What to say to the colleague? I even caught myself hearing them as if spoken aloud, though my mouth remained closed. Eventually, the tea in the mug grew cold, the background music became a uniform noise, and the street lamp's light still slid across the ceiling, until I felt my body growing heavy, my head nodding. I got up, turned off the overhead light, and left only the bedside lamp on. Its warm yellow circle fell onto the wall, creating a cozy, soft spot. It felt as if a small, artificial sun had been lit in the corner of the room. I lay down, covered myself with the blanket, and felt the familiar coolness of the sheet. My breathing became deeper, slower. Thoughts dissolved one by one. It felt like someone was lowering a transparent lid onto my head. Not heavy, but one that cut off everything unnecessary. And right then I saw it. On the wall, where the lamp's light should have fallen evenly, a darker patch appeared. At first, I thought it was just a shadow from something, a chair, a book, or my hand, which had just moved. But I hadn't moved. The spot was irregularly shaped, without sharp edges, without a clear object that would cast it. Just a mass of darkness inside the warm, yellow circle of light. I squinted. Then I noticed the main thing. It wasn't just hanging there. It was pulsing. It wasn't moving along the wall, sliding, or stretching up or down. It was specifically pulsing, darkening, then becoming slightly lighter, darkening again, longer this time. The rhythm was strange. Not like a metronome, not like breathing. But the longer I looked, the more I realized. 1, darker. 2, slightly lighter. 3, darker, longer, heavier. I wanted to lift my hand to rub my eyes. For a moment, I even thought that tired eyes were simply playing tricks on me. I tried. I couldn't. At first, I decided I had just lain down uncomfortably. But then my legs felt heavy, my arms felt heavy, my back felt pressed deeper into the mattress than usual. I tried to move my fingers. 0. Not just movement. Even the sensation of where they lay was muffled. I tried to swallow. My tongue barely moved. My throat reacted with a faint, choked echo. There was no sound. The cliché thought, as always in these situations, entered my head. Sleep paralysis. It's sleep paralysis. It will pass now. My body disagreed. The weight of the blanket suddenly felt unnatural, as if 3 more, invisible but very real, had been placed on top of me. My chest rose superficially in short bursts like someone afraid to inhale too deeply. My ears began to pick up my own pulse. Softly at first, on the periphery. Thump, thump, thump. Then louder, louder. And what was more terrifying, I suddenly realized that the pulse in my ears was starting to coincide with the pulsing of the shadow on the wall. 1, darker. Thump in the ears. 2, lighter. Thump, weaker. 3, darker, longer. Thump, 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 with a glitch. I tried to look away, to shift my eyes elsewhere, to the lamp, the nightstand, even the ceiling. My eyes moved, but with enormous resistance, as if held by an invisible film. The feeling was that my entire body was already asleep, but something single had awakened inside. Raw consciousness deprived of its levers. Neither with my hands, nor my feet, nor my voice could I change anything. And the shadow, meanwhile, was growing darker and closer. The pulse on the wall intensified. Each darker moment was felt in the air like a weak thud, as if someone on the other side of the wall was tapping with a fist, not hard, but rhythmically. And then a sound appeared in those thuds, indistinct, muffled, first like creaking in the pipes, then like a distant voice stuck between two layers of concrete. Here, the words seemed to break between the beats. One darker, one sound. Finny. The next pulse became longer. The shadow expanded, taking in part of the lamp's light. The room grew darker, although I distinctly saw that the lamp had not dimmed. This is your rhythm. I lost my breath. One inhale came out too sharp, the next too short. My chest constricted from the inside, as if strapped with a belt. The shadow grew, not just a spot on the wall. Now it was almost a figure. The lower edge reached the baseboard, the top almost touched the ceiling. Each of its thuds resonated in my ribs. I felt my heart try to maintain its rhythm, but something external kept knocking it off, pushing it harder. You are beating. Pause. I like it. Here I was truly frightened for the first time. Before this, everything could be attributed to a sleep-playing brain. It happens, you dream, you feel pressure, it seems real. But now I felt that something external was trying to adjust to me, to my beats, to my heart. The shadow detached from the wall. Not with a leap, not abruptly. It simply separated. The edges were no longer tied to the wallpaper. Like smoke, like gel, like something too dense to be air. It slowly moved forward. I felt the temperature in the room dropping. Not sharply, but slowly, by a degree, then two more, then another. The skin on my arms, which I still couldn't feel, began to go numb. Something flat, large, and cold touched the edge of the mattress. I didn't see hands or feet. The shadow simply placed a part of itself onto the bed. And again, the thud. One, darker, closer. Thump in the chest. Pulse is weakening. The voice became more distinct, clearer, almost human, but with a metallic echo. Don't worry, I will help. Something slid along my side. Not fingers, not a palm, like a piece of shadow that had gained weight and temperature. The cold seeped through my t-shirt, clinging to my ribs. And at the same moment, I stopped feeling where my body ended. It felt as if half of me had been erased with a dull silhouette. I knew my arm was there, but the sensation, none. The shadow moved on, slowly, rhythmically. One, closer to the chest. Two, wider, covering the stomach. Three, rising higher. Give. The voice became almost steady. A little more of yourself. The shadow lay on my ribcage, not with the force of weight, but with the force of pressure, as if a huge, soft stone had been lowered onto me, one that didn't crush but forced everything inside to work slower. Each of its pulses now resonated not just in my ears, but in my very heart. The shadow beat from above, my heart from below. For the first few seconds, they were out of sync. My heart, thump, 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 fast, panicked. It slowly, heavily, one, two skips, two. Then the gaps began to narrow. My rhythm, nervous and broken, tried to speed up. Its rhythm became more frequent, more certain. I could literally feel that each subsequent shadow beat was pressing my heart into a new measure. If my heart tried to jump ahead, the shadow caught up and pressed down. If it lagged, the shadow nudged it. Let go, the voice whispered, but I didn't know who it was addressing, my heart or me. I will coincide with you. Short pause. And you with me. My ears suddenly clogged, as if I had plunged underwater. All the sound of the world disappeared. Only two things remained. A steel, heavy, muffled boom from above the shadow's beat. A wet, soft, living thump inside my heart. They merged. Boom thump, boom thump, boom thump. And after a few cycles, It became difficult to tell whose was whose. The air in my lungs thickened. Inhale, short, unfinished. Exhale, long, sluggish, as if I was being forced to breathe out more than I wanted. The shadow leaned closer. I couldn't see a face. It didn't exist. But I felt that its something was hovering right over mine. See? The voice trembled synchronously with the beat. Nothing hurts, and I'm already inside you. The coldness seeped deeper. Not on the skin, in the blood vessels. It was a familiar yet distorted feeling, as if my toes had lost circulation, and then this numbness crept upward, to my knees, to my stomach. I tried to scream, but my throat was tightly constricted from the inside. My jaw wouldn't obey. I felt my breathing, but couldn't make a sound. Quiet, the shadow whispered. If you start to scream, pause. I will have to take everything faster. A beat. My heart misfired. One rhythm disappeared, as if someone had torn a frame from the reel. In that second, I felt emptiness. Complete, absolute. There was nothing inside my rib cage. No weight, no warmth, no pulse. The shadow seemed to freeze with satisfaction. There, you go. The voice was no longer nearby, but inside. See how good it is when you don't interfere. My breathing almost vanished. I only caught tiny movements in my chest. The sensation of air in my throat was minimal, as if I was breathing not with my lungs, but with a memory of them. Everything around me became not just dark, but flat. Sound, depth, volume, everything was erased. There was only me, the heart trying to remember how to work, and the shadow working in its place. A little more, it whispered synchronously with the rhythm. You will get used to it. When you wake up, you will no longer be separate from me. I was truly afraid only at this moment. Not of the thought that I might die. The thought of death was strangely detached. The other thing was frightening, that I would wake up, but a part of what the shadow was taking would remain inside it. That my heart would never again beat to my rhythm alone. I tried to gather the last crumb of will. Not my fingers, not my arms, a thought. No, it wasn't a scream. It wasn't a voice. Just a sharp, hard no inside my head. For a moment, the shadow misfired. One of its beats came out off-tempo. Heart, thump, shadow, boom, delayed. And in that microsecond of rupture, I felt a gap. Another no. Stronger. Cruder. Not a plea. Resistance. The shadow stirred nervously. The rhythm that had just been so confident went out of sync. Don't. The voice cracked as if breaking. You don't. Interfere. Another beat. Heart, on its own course. Shadow on its own. Two different waves overlapped. And at the point where they didn't match, something popped. Not on my chest. In the darkness. I inhaled. A real one. Deep. Painful. The air slammed into my lungs so sharply that it felt like I had surfaced from icy water. Noise rushed into my head, so loud that I was momentarily deafened by my own breathing. The paralysis broke. Not smoothly, like shattered glass. My arms twitched. My fingers crumpled the blanket. My neck twisted so sharply that I felt a stabbing pain in the muscles. I sat up in bed. My chest was heaving. My heart was beating unevenly, sometimes very fast, sometimes with pauses, as if still trying to decide who to adjust to. The bedside lamp shone steadily. The yellow spot on the wall was normal. No pulsations, no shadow. I sat and listened. To my heartbeat, to my breathing, to the radiator creaking, to distant sounds from the street. The world seemed too loud after that silence. A few minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time felt strangely stretched. I finally managed to get out of bed, walked to the wall, and ran my palm over the place where the shadow had just been seen. Cold. The wall was colder than the others. Not freezing, but cool enough to feel it. In the lower corner of the yellow light circle, I noticed something strange, as if a piece of the shadow hadn't managed to escape. It wasn't a spot from the lamp, a reflection, or a shadow from the furniture. A small dark oval, matte, reflecting no light. It simply sat in the corner, like a bruise on the wall's skin. I froze, staring at it. My heart was still beating unevenly. And then it happened. The shadow in the corner barely twitched. Once, at that exact moment, my heart skipped a beat. Another barely perceptible pulse from the spot. Another minor misfire in my rhythm. They were in unison. I backed away from the wall so quickly that I almost fell. The lamp suddenly seemed too bright, the room too confined. I returned to the bed, sat down, held my hand to my chest, and closed my eyes, consciously this time truly. In the darkness behind my eyelids, there were no spots, no lamps, no walls. Only my heart, and somewhere on the very edge of consciousness, a faint whisper delayed by half a beat. We will coincide again. The evening was quiet, too quiet for a usual city day. I was arranging things on my desk, book here, pen there, charger in the drawer. Simple actions, even movements, things in their places. At least, so it seemed to me. When I turned away, the order vanished. The pen was lying at a different angle. The charger, not in the drawer, but on the edge of the desk. The book, open, although I definitely closed it. Small anomalies could be blamed on fatigue, on accidental errors, on absent-mindedness. I did just that. I turned off the light. I lay down. The darkness was calm, ordinary. Sleep came quickly. I opened my eyes not because I woke up, but because I was opened, as if someone had parted my eyelids with their fingers from the inside. My body didn't respond. Not a finger, not a muscle. Even my chest wasn't breathing normally. It was short, jerky, as if in someone else's organism. The first thing I saw was the desk, and it was empty, border, clean, white, as if I had never placed anything on it. I tried to move my arm. No result. Something snapped in my head like a thin cord. The realization that I was defenseless. The silence became dense. Then, the first sound. Thud. A pen was lying on a desk. Not a drop. Not a toss. It was placed there, so carefully that it didn't even wobble. Thud. The charger appeared. Thud, thud. Then the book. Then the notebook. Then a pair of old keys I had lost a month ago. Then a flash drive I hadn't seen for a year. Each item appeared not from the darkness, but as if from invisible hands that simply decided that this was correct. And they were arranging everything in a perfect line. Spacing matching spacing. Angle matching angle. Straighter than I could achieve with my own hands. And then, a new sound. Damp. A dark, moist circle appeared on the desk. Empty, as if left by a non-existent cup. A moment later, another one. Then a third. They formed a large palm. The fingers were too long. Thin, silent. As if the hands belonged to a creature without bones. I felt cold in my feet, but not from fear. But because my feet ceased to be a part of me. They were just space. The lamp's light began to flicker. Not in the usual way when a bulb blinks, but as if the light was being squeezed by a palm. The lamp gave light, and someone immediately suppressed it. The air became thick. Breathing felt like someone had placed a sandbag on my chest. And then I heard movement. Shurrrh. From the corner of the room. There was a dark space there that I never looked at for more than a second, because it was always darker than it should be. The darkness changed. It didn't flow. It shifted like a shadow being repositioned by hands. And it seemed to be listening. While you, didnotput it, like that. The voice was hoarse, but not human. It didn't echo in my ear. It was stuck between the objects. It was born where the items stood. The desk trembled again. The items moved half a millimeter. Together, in one motion, as if the entire surface had breathed. I tried to close my eyes, but my eyelids wouldn't obey. A man without movement, like an exhibit. The moist palm print changed shape. The fingers seemed to rise slightly, even though they weren't three-dimensional. It created the impression that the palm was listening. Thump! Something fell to the floor behind me. Not heavy, but something that made me want to turn around. I couldn't. The darkness in the corner twitched a second time. I felt a slight cold draft on my cheek, as if someone was standing close, very close, and just being silent. The voice now sounded right over my ear, so close that the weight of the words seemed palpable in the air. The lamp's light went out completely, not naturally, but as if it had been switched off from the inside. The darkness became unnaturally dense. Not black, thick. The room momentarily resembled a box filled with gray dust. The desk slid a few centimeters. Not abruptly, but as if someone was aligning it relative to the wall line. The bedding beneath my back gave a faint wave, as if someone was leaning on the edge of the mattress to stand up. I heard the shadow, just as clearly as hearing a person standing nearby try not to breathe. And that silence was the most terrifying thing, because it wasn't empty. It held attention. Attention directed at me. The moist print on the desk expanded. The fingers became wider, longer, so long that they took up half the surface. Creak, shift. The desk moved again. The items glided straight sideways, as if the desk was being pulled toward someone for a closer look. I heard sounds behind me, but they weren't footsteps. They were about the displacement of space. The wall behind my back seemed to draw closer. Not physically, but perceptually, as if someone was standing where it had previously been empty. While H-O-L-D. While you are W-R-L-D. The voice no longer sounded like one, as if several different rhythms were speaking the same phrase, but disjointedly. Creak, slide. The desk moved forward once more. The darkness in the corner swelled, and then I understood it wasn't just moving things anymore. It was arranging the room to its liking. The items formed a perfectly straight row, then a second one, then a square. The shadow was making my room the way it wanted it to be. I felt it. If it touched me, it would also try to align me. When the shadow first moved the mattress, even by a few millimeters, the paralysis shattered as if a rope had been cut with a knife. I broke free. I gasped for air so loudly it was as if I'd been pulled out from under the ground. The light in the room returned. The items were in place. The desk was calm. The darkness was ordinary. Only one thing hadn't changed: the moist palm print on the desk. Long, thin, alien, and warm, as if that hand was still here. It just stopped moving things the moment I woke up. That evening, I suddenly decided to tidy up the apartment, not out of necessity, rather from a strange internal impulse, a feeling that the air had thickened and something extra had accumulated in it. I wiped the dust, put things back in place, moved the chair, and swept debris from under the wardrobe. And as I was mopping the floor under the desk, I noticed a small dark stain. It didn't look like dirt or ink, more like a trace from an animal's tongue. The kind you get when a child or dog touches a surface with a wet mouth. I leaned down and ran a rag over the spot. It didn't disappear. Then I touched it with my finger and felt warmth. Not my warmth, and not the room's. A strange, slightly pulsing warmth, as if the spot were alive. I forced a smile, blamed everything on fatigue, stood up, and finished cleaning. The room looked clean. Correct. Even a little sterile. I washed my hands, turned off the light, and lay down in bed. The air smelled of detergent. The silence was deep, even. Before falling asleep, I heard a sound near the floor. SHHH. My first thought was of bags, wind, a mouse, anything. But sleep covered me so quickly that I couldn't finish the thought. I woke up instantly, without transition, without sleep, and without movement. My body didn't react. Not my fingers, not my lips, not my neck. No hint of control. My breathing became shallow, superficial, as if my lungs were working separately from me. The room looked darker than it should have been. The street lamp's light didn't fall in a flat strip. It literally hung in the air, not moving. The silence became so thick that it felt like it could be cut with a knife. And then I heard it again. SHHH, the sound of sliding. Slow, wet, inevitable. I could only move my eyes, and that was enough. Something was moving near the floor. First, a stain, then a silhouette, and finally, a body. The entity moved on all fours, but its knees did not touch the floor. It glided above the wood, as if on an invisible layer of air. Its skin was morbidly pale, almost white, but stained with a hue of deadness. And its eyes were completely white, smooth, flat, like two pieces of frosted glass. And they glowed with a cold, subdued light. The entity's mouth opened slowly, too slowly, as if the movement was unnatural for it. Something shifted out of the dark of its mouth, stretched out, gleamed with a wet shine. A black tongue, long, thin, flexible, and so glossy as if it had just been pulled out of liquid metal. It touched the floor, slid, left a dark streak. The entity moved toward the bed soundlessly, cautiously, with the unhurried confidence of a predator that knows its prey cannot escape. When it reached the level of my eyes, the world around me seemed smaller. The air cooled so much that I could see a faint mist on my breath. The entity slowly raised its head, the white eyes fixated directly opposite mine. And then I heard its voice, not like a voice, more like a dry rustle forced into words. "You are warm." Its tongue slowly rose. It touched my jaw, cold, sticky, almost gentle, as if it didn't want to inflict pain, as if it wanted to feel the details. It licked my neck, slowly, persistently, methodically. I love warm things. I saw myself reflected in its white eyes, small, trembling, condemned to watch. The tongue rose higher, to my temple, to my eye. It stopped a millimeter away. I felt the cold air before the touch, a coldness that wasn't natural. "Give more." There was no malice in its voice. It didn't want to steal anything. It didn't want to break or destroy. It was simply studying me. The warmth, the heartbeat, the softness of the skin, the gleam of the eyes. It wanted to experience me as a phenomenon. Its tongue lightly touched my eyelid. An icy shock pierced my entire body. And at that exact moment, my heart slammed so hard that something inside the paralysis cracked. I lunged. I sat up abruptly, making the bed bounce. The room was empty. Empty. But on the floor, where the entity had glided, lay a dark, glossy streak. Thin, even. I watched it for a few seconds. The streak seemed to tremble. And then slowly, very slowly, it disappeared, leaving behind only a scent of cold metal, as if someone had just been in the room, someone who had never known warmth, but was searching for it in me. The evening was the kind where you crave silence, but the silence itself feels too scrutinizing. I returned home later than planned, not because of work. I just wanted to walk. My head was heavy, my legs tired, my thoughts empty. In the apartment, I made tea, went into the bedroom, and paused by the door. I heard a strange sound in the hallway. Thump, thump, slow, drawn-out steps, as if the foot touched the floor not instantly, but with a delay, like someone who isn't used to their own weight. I peered through the peephole. Empty. The hallway light was dim, ordinary. Must have imagined it. I lay in bed, pulled the blanket up, and felt my body literally melting into the mattress. My eyes were heavy, my thoughts drowning in sleepy haze. And then, just before finally drifting off, I heard it again. Thump, thump. Closer now, right outside the bedroom door. I tried to lift my head, and at that moment, sleep covered me so sharply that I didn't even have time to realize something was wrong. I plunged into it instantly. My eyes open on their own, wide, too wide, like someone who has just been startled and frozen. My body didn't move, not even my tongue, not even my toes. The room was silent, not just quiet, stiflingly quiet. a silence that felt like a mass lying on my chest. And then I realized I wasn't alone in the room. He was standing in the doorway, a dark figure, tall, abnormally tall, and his hands hung down to his knees like a marionette with broken proportions. His fingers almost touched the floor, long, thin, slightly curved, as if designed for touching, not for movement. The figure stood motionless, but I saw his chest slowly rising and falling, as if with effort. I couldn't blink. The man tilted his head slightly to the side, so slowly, as if his neck consisted of dozens of tiny hinges. Then, the first step, SCRR, not the sound of a step, but the sound of fingers dragging on the floor behind him. The second step, his fingers stretched out like wet shadows, separately from his arms, as if they lived a life of their own. He walked toward me slowly, as if he had all the time in the world, and I was his only target. When he got close enough, I saw his face, or rather, what should have been his face. There was nothing there, no features, no shadow of a hint of human form. A blur like smearing graphite with a finger. He leaned down, his hands lifted, his fingers hovered over my legs, and, slowly, they settled onto the blanket. Coldness entered the fabric instantly. Not frost, not ice, the cold of absence, like a place where warmth never resides. His fingers moved upward over the blanket, in, as if exploring the surface of my body beneath the fabric. I am not disturbing. The voice didn't come from him. It came from everywhere. From under the bed, from the corners of the room, from beneath my ribs. I just reached out. The fingers were already near my knees. Stretching further, a second hand appeared to the right of my head. I didn't see the movement. It simply materialized, as if flowing out of the darkness near my face. The fingers touched my cheek, lightly, so lightly that it was scarier than a blow. The cold became sharp, deep, penetrating the bones. He leaned closer. The featureless face hovered over mine, so close that I could smell it, damp, stale cold, like from abandoned basements. You lie close. His fingers on my thigh stopped. The fingers near my cheek smoothly slid toward my temple. I like it when it's close. His hands slowly, too slowly, began to spread, as if he wanted to frame my body. And then I understood. He didn't want to grab me. He wanted to measure, evaluate, memorize the shape, like a child learning to draw with their hands. I walk for a long time, searching who I can reach. His hands were still gliding. His fingers touched the blanket, the skin, the pillow, the air near my lips. I felt that he was waiting for the moment when my fear would be maximal, when I stopped fighting internally. The pressure on my chest intensified. The paralysis squeezed me tighter than ever. It felt like I was no longer breathing, but only remembering how it was done. His fingers descended to my neck. The touch was cold, but not aggressive, as if he was checking if I was still here. And at that exact moment, the internal fear burst through the paralysis, as if something inside me broke and crushed the metallic shackles of sleep. I broke free, abruptly, painfully, as if my skin was also trying to tear away from the spot. I scrambled back to the headboard. The room was empty. The darkness, ordinary. The air, motionless. But on the floor from the doorway to my bed, for long, perfectly straight scratches stretched out. So long that they could only have been left by someone with fingers that truly reached down to their knees.